Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends, my most popular series returns. The Dirty Dozen is back for another update. My apologies for the length since my last video. These have been popular tier list videos since my channel's inception, and I tend to update them after a new guild raid boss. We haven't actually had a new guild raid boss since Riptide in September of last year, hence the delay. As a reminder, the Dirty Dozen uses 3 key metrics to evaluate characters: their use in guild raids, guild war, and horde mode, a term I've coined to describe performance in wave-based modes like legendary release events and survival. The idea is to allow you, the viewer and player, to maximize your investment and gain rewards. If you don't like that min-max sort of strategy, that's fine. I'm just warning you about the nature of this video and its content. Anyway, if you're just here for the free stuff, then leaving a comment enters you into a giveaway where you can earn Laviscus shards. Everyone, giveaway or not, also gets some free stuff with the code on screen, which will be valid for about a week. A lot has happened since my last video, and I've had time to reflect on how I want to adjust the scoring system. One of the top comments on my last video was from this guy, who criticized the omission of Exeter Row from the highest rankings. It received a lot of support and made me re-evaluate things. In my previous scoring model, I looked at how good a character was against each boss and averaged that score, which then fed into a 60% multiplier for the overall score. Row was unusable against Call and pretty terrible against Ghazghkull. In hindsight, I think I actually massively overrated him against Magnus too. Anyway, the old system just averaged performances against bosses and fed them into the matrix. As I started to update things for Lion's arrival, it made me realize that the raid scoring system was becoming too complex and needlessly nuanced in a world where we have 12 raid bosses. So things are going to be simpler. I'm just going to give a character a raid score, and then I'll have my graphic where I rank teams against raid bosses. Moving forward, I'll also include machines of war and assess characters including their relic. I appreciate that a lot of players won't have characters at Mythic, but with the new Onslaught rework, that isn't as much of a pipe dream as it once was. Perhaps a quick sidestep into the scoring. The 1 to 5 scale is hopefully self-explanatory, with 5 being really good in that game mode. For example, Kariyan has a 5 in raids because he is excellent and also a core part of the best raid team. Sho has a 3.5 because he's a fringe player, but usable in the mech team, which remains one of the meta options. For war, it gets a bit trickier, but I try to take into account the character's performance on both offense and defense. It's not a perfect way to amalgamate performance metrics, but tier lists are imperfect by nature. So Boss Gulgortz is really good on offense, but less so on defense when the AI doesn't reliably use his active ability, so I've reflected that with a 3.5 score. We'll start with a brief general overview of things. This was last edition's Dirty Dozen from September of last year. Now, the current version. We'll talk about all 12 before moving into raid-specific discussions. It should come as no great surprise that Kariyan is king in the Dirty Dozen, given how powerful the character is, especially in raids. I've dedicated an entire video extolling the virtues of the Custodes team, and that team has only become better since the last iteration of the Dirty Dozen, with the addition of Laviscus. The big hit, or Laviscus team, is, I think, the best raid team in the game. The Custodes team video I did highlights Kariyan's value specifically, and I'll come to Laviscus and Gulgortz later. Beyond raids, Kariyan is also great in war and horde modes. I could honestly see an argument for giving him 5 out of 5 in horde mode, just because of how good he is at surviving with his traits and stats, and also his regular area of effect attacks. I'm not spending too much time here because Kariyan being top should hopefully not surprise anyone, even without a unique relic. The Orc war boss maintains his high ranking, and it is well deserved. He maintains his position because of how beautiful his active is with Laviscus, and that combo forms the basis for the strongest raid team in the game. Giving an uncapped bonus hit to Laviscus is, simply put, broken. For the uninitiated, the sequencing is usually using Kariyan's active on turn 6 from high ground, then you use Gulgortz's active when he is next to Laviscus. The rest of the team attacks, and Laviscus finishes with a huge double hit. On top of that, his active is hugely impactful in war. He summons 2 units. 3 units on your team take an action. You then give a movement bonus to several units on your team, and he also gives extra damage to several units on your team. Individually, nothing there is overpowered, but when you add them all together, you have a unit that has an active ability that does basically everything. His passive, when leveled, gives you the ability to reliably kill 2 enemies per turn in horde mode, and his relic only improves him in that game mode. I'm not going to labor the point. Gulgortz is awesome. The Biovore enters the Dirty Dozen very comfortably in this first edition that includes machines of war. The value for the Biovore is best understood when you understand how the game AI operates. Enemy characters like to target units that they can bring closest to death. The Biovore creates spore mines that you can use to repeatedly bait characters, and that makes the Biovore awesome for war. It's also the best machine for raids for similar reasons. Once you understand boss AI, the Biovore is the easiest and most valuable way to manipulate boss positioning. You can see how in this clip we get Sarek down off his throne into relative low ground against the rest of our team, which enables crazy high raid scores. On top of already being excellent for positioning, it also gives your team bonus damage with the mythic ability, and the Spore Mine's damage is not negligible. Kharn remains excellent, and his presence here is carried by the strong war showing. His active can usually kill 2 or 3 enemies at once, and I particularly like him against Jude, where the active is able to one-shot the difficult-to-beat Genestealer cult hero despite her passive ability. Beyond that, he is solid and reliable in the big hit team, although there is a lot of flexibility in terms of bosses that you can use him against. In general, he is a solid unit that does very well in every game mode, and at the end of the day, that's the exact kind of character that the Dirty Dozen looks for. Continuing along the theme of Chaos units, the War Master of Chaos comes in the 5th position. Abaddon's passive ability makes him really strong as a buffer in raids, but he has additional value due to his Terminator armor that lets him tank abilities like Call's AoE beam. That allows you to manipulate the boss positioning to your advantage. Beyond that, the Relic makes him really good in Horde modes, where he can potentially kill 4 targets in a single turn through the splash damage from the Relic, as well as the extra attack he does. I was swithering between a 4 and a 4.5 for him in War, but I've had a lot of success using him in the Chaos lineups, and therefore opted for the latter for the time being. Next, we have another summoner, Archie. Hopefully I don't need to extol the virtues of summoners to you all by this stage, but they are great and I really value them highly in Horde mode and War. I did a bit of math back when Archie was reworked along with Tacticus ambassador and friend Trajann. Archie's active ability is super impressive if you can find the space to get all of the bloodletters off, and he usually one-shots enemies with his active. Archie has the added advantage that he has the Book of Fate relic, which makes him a core part of the Psyker raid team. The main negative against him is how squishy he is, but with the correct play that hopefully shouldn't matter too much. Next up we have another Chaos unit, this time Zakar. I was impressed with Zakar when he first released, but time has gone on to prove that even that initial assessment was an underestimation. In raids, he is the linchpin and probably does at least as much damage as the Neurothrope within the Psyker team. While the Psyker team is probably just a notch below the Laviscus team, it is still excellent, and as I have illustrated in the past, it's the best team to deal with higher rarity and armoured bosses, especially as they start to scale past your non-psychic damage based teams. In War, he's also pretty great, and the secondary ability is deceptively powerful. You can use him with Typhus as part of a burst damage combo to a group of clumped enemies, but he's also amazing alongside Ahriman, who appreciates the extra fire hexes for his active, or really any Psyker setup. In Horde mode, he can similarly do a lot of reliable damage. The main downside is how expensive he is to deploy in raids, so you can't go crazy with him or have the Psyker team as your only raid team. Back to Imperial characters briefly. We have another Custodes on the list, Trajann. He is the damage buffer for the Laviscus team and enables Kariyan in a manner no one else in the game does. I won't spend too much time on that interaction and again direct you to my Custodes raid team video. He isn't amazing in Horde mode, but I like the healing he gives himself, and if you pop his active next to a spawn point, he functions a bit like Angrax for a turn. In War, he is best along with the same characters you use in the Custodes raid team, and I've had a lot of success running that team in War with Trajann tying them all together. Next up is Aesoth. I drew some criticism when I talked about how Aesoth was likely to be a big part of the new big hit or Laviscus team when I did my Laviscus showcase. I'm glad that over time I've been vindicated. Aesoth offers 2 things within that raid team that I think make him appealing. First, his passive boosts Kariyan's damage output, and Kariyan is the biggest part of that team, at least in terms of damage to enable Laviscus. Secondly, similarly to Abaddon against Call, Aesoth finds a niche against some bosses where his active lets him survive an otherwise unsurvivable attack, which is super helpful for positioning and keeping the boss contained exactly where you want him. I like him for the extra armor and survivability in Horde mode, and the double stun is also great in War, making him a well-rounded but excellent choice for the metagame at the moment. I'm going to lump the next 2 together because they're both Chaos Psykers and score well here for broadly the same reasons. Both are core parts of the Psyker raid team and enable the Neurothrope and Zakar through the Book of Fate relic and passive abilities. Both characters' actives equip them well for Guild War and Horde mode, as both summons and repeatable AoE damage both have good value. They tend to drop off a bit at higher levels of LRE, where their defensive fragility can be exposed. On the whole, however, they're still reasonable choices. There's not much to separate the two, and accordingly they are placed here within the dozen. Lastly, Tangira. Oh, how the AdMech have fallen. The rise of the Laviscus team and Psyker team has put a dampener on the once great and omnipresent mechs. They're still fine, but the new pecking order is reflected in Tangira's drop down the rankings. Of all the options within the mech team, Tangira has the most value outside of raids through his summons, and actually with the right support he's pretty good in horde mode and war, clinging on to his spot in the dozen. Next up, here are the scores for the top 30 characters that didn't quite make the Dirty Dozen cut. We can see some familiar names here, and I'll just talk about a few. Rivas actually ties for the top 12, and is a really good character, especially with her relic recharging her active. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that she is the best horde mode character in the game, but I've left her off the top 12 infographic to avoid the calls of Tau nepotism, but her score is tied with Tangira. The battlesuits aren't amazing in raids at the moment outside of Ghazghkull, or unless you massively overstat the Lion, but I'm holding out hope for a relic that can revitalize the team. As we've already spoken about, the AdMechs have dropped out of favour and dropped out of the dozen, but they are still good choices overall. Vitruvius sometimes sees play in the Laviscus team and is probably the best of the bunch from a raid perspective. While I wouldn't suggest you invest in them right now, as we've seen, all they need is a relic to be right back in the top of meta discussions. The man of the hour, Laviscus, is truly dominating the raid landscape. His kit is amazing, and by now lots of people have uploaded their replays showing off high scores with the character. I will say that Laviscus and his team really reward understanding of boss movement and positioning. If you can lock a boss down for Lav to benefit from high ground and crushing strike, then you quite literally multiply your damage several times. Despite being such a powerhouse in raid, he's pretty anemic in war and horde mode, which is why he doesn't make the dozen. Baldur is the final mention here, and I've been really impressed with his healing. Perhaps it's my D&D background, but using one action and getting multiple heals ticks a lot of boxes from an action economy point of view, and it gets even better when you give him his relic and can tack on an attack to the same action. I've been super impressed with him, and I have to commend Snowprint on their design here. I really like the character. Now that we have the top 30 characters, I thought I'd take a bit more time and talk about guild raids. The graph should hopefully be easy enough to understand. It is a rough guide, so take it with a pinch of salt, because it's hard to standardize the teams and performance for every player in the game against every rarity of boss. I would also put a big asterisk next to the Lion, as we need more time and testing to see how he settles. I guess there are the standard disclaimers. These are my views and you're welcome to disagree with me, but it's really difficult to give people a standardized one-size-fits-all approach. For example, the Battlesuit team is great against Ghazghkull at almost all skill levels and rarities, whereas the Laviscus team into Mortarion requires maxed out characters and literally perfect positioning. Obviously, if you overstat a boss and the intended boss mechanics don't matter to your team, then a lot of this doesn't apply. To use the Battlesuit team again as an example, the Lion reaches 100% block really quickly against that team. However, if you massively overstat him and your damage buffers provide much more than his block amount, then you don't really care about his mechanics and the team becomes pretty good. Anyway, that's been a longer video by my standards, so I'm sorry about that. If there are topics or things that you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments and I'll try and get to it. Thanks as always to my Patreons and YouTube members for their support, and bye for now.